Hello everyone, I'm Deborah Garlick from Henpicked Menopause in the Workplace and author of the book Menopause, The Change for the Better. Thank you very much for joining us today. And I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by Jackie Lynch, registered nutritional therapist. Welcome, Jackie. And this has proved to be a very, very popular subject. Menopause and improving sleep naturally. And this actually got me to the point of thinking, is anybody getting a good night's sleep? It's a common symptom of the menopause, and so many people say, I'm just not able to get to sleep or stay asleep. So it's great to have you here again, Jackie, and I'm going to start by asking you that question. What is going on?
Hi, Deborah. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me again. Well, there's a lot going on. And I mean, we all know that we're better for a good night's sleep. It's not rocket science. You know, if we don't sleep well, we are tired, irritable, we're less productive, we're not great to be around. And if that happens on a cycle, then it really does mess with our physical and mental health and well-being. The problem with midlife is that there's just, as always, an awful lot going on. First of all, of course, if you're struggling with hot flushes and night sweats, that's going to disrupt your sleep. But it's worth remembering that even if you're not prone to those particular menopause symptoms, there are still hormonal surges going on. And these can still cause you to suddenly wake up and you think, well, I don't know quite what caused that. Why am I awake, not sweating? They can cause a disruption to your sleep, so that even if you stay asleep, it's a restless sleep, so you wake feeling unrefreshed. And of course, we can't ignore the impact of stress, because midlife really is the most stressful time of a woman's life. There's too many balls in the air, too much juggling going on. If you have children, then you might have the clash of the hormones in the household, where menopause meets puberty. You might be struggling to care for elderly relatives. Professional women usually have more responsibility at work. There's all the myriad issues of life. Money worries, health worries, relationship concerns, or so many things going on. And when you put a cocktail of hormones together, the ups and downs of your sex hormones, because we know they're going up and down at this time, and you mix them up with your stress hormones, then it's a perfect storm of stuff, which means that at the very moment where you want to lie down and have everything relax, it's all going crazy.
It's all going crazy, and you can really feel it. And right back at the beginning there, you said when you get a good night's sleep, you feel great, you can do anything.
Yeah.
But it is this constant staying awake or periods of complete sleeplessness. So from a natural point of view, what can we do to help ourselves during this time?
Well, there's lots of things you can do, and I think it's really important to be proactive about this and not just put up and shut up. There's lots of practical things you can do around making the bedroom a more sleep-friendly space, particularly if you struggle with hot flushes and sweats. You can opt for, there's some great femtech clothing out there now, which is designed for women who have hot flushes and sweats, which often is better than cotton in the same way as sportswear is usually not cotton. It's these special fabrics that absorb, so you don't get all clammy. Thinking about leaving the window open, having sort of his and hers duvets, so yours is thinner and lighter if you're feeling overheated, just practical things like that. But from a food perspective, which of course is my particular area of expertise, I think the first thing to do is to sort your blood sugar out, because if you're in the habit of getting off to sleep no problem, but wake up for no apparent reason in the middle of the night, and it's not a hot flush, and you think, well, there wasn't any noise, I don't know what's going on, the chances are it's your blood sugar, because as your blood sugar crashes, it releases stress hormones, and when the stress hormones have been released, their job is to create that fight or flight response. So there's this big surge of adrenaline and cortisol, and they want you to get ready to face that imminent physical danger that they're designed to deal with. So of course, if you're fast asleep, in the background, you're going to be having cortisol saying, wake up, sort it out, there's a danger on the way. And you'll wake up and think, don't know what that is, but you can't get back to sleep. So you need to be thinking carefully about what you're eating throughout the day, but specifically in the evening, because with blood sugar, what goes up must come down.
Okay, so when you talk about these blood sugar surges, can I be clear? Because I like I have drinking chocolate before I go to bed. I like my sugar is it sugar surges, or is it, is it how much sugar I eat during the day or other foods I eat during the day?
Okay, so unsurprisingly, things that make the blood sugar go up would be sugary foods, cakes, cookies, chocolate, etc. But also refined carbohydrate, because the body breaks down refined carbohydrate much more quickly. So white bread, white rice, white pasta. So if you have, for example, a big bowl of white pasta in the evening, and maybe just with some tomato sauce on top, your body's going to burn through that like nobody's business, and you will have a blood sugar crash. In answer to your question about the infamous drinking chocolate, you've got two factors going on there that could potentially be an issue. Usually, depending on the powder you're using, there's quite a lot of sugar in these drinks. So yes, that could be already starting a spike. But let's not forget that chocolate is a big source of caffeine. I think people often forget, you think of tea and coffee and some of the diet drinks that contain caffeine, but actually chocolate, dark chocolate, is a big source of caffeine. Usually this, yeah, it is. I mean, I haven't had caffeine as a drink since 2005. I've been a herbal girl ever since then. But I do like the occasional chocolate, and I prefer the healthy dark chocolate. But I need to be very careful not to have that in the evening, because if I make the mistake and have some, because I'm now so sensitive to caffeine, I'm awake till 4 in the morning, which I can't do. So you need to be looking at that. Now, not everybody's going to be that sensitive, and you may be fine, Deborah, but the thing is, if you're having the hot chocolate, it's worth remembering, particularly if it's something like the green and black's cocoa powder, which is dark, as opposed to the sort of Cadbury's hot chocolate thing, which hasn't really got much cocoa in it, full stop. That could be enough to tip the balance. So really worth just being careful and looking at things like that.
Well, I might have to ask you what I need to be looking for then, because for me, that was always the grandma's, this will help you sleep. A glass of or a mug of cocoa, or drinking chocolate. So I'm a little bit shocked that that's not a good habit.
Well, it depends on the individual. We've got to recognize that we all have a different ability to process caffeine in the liver. It all comes down to the amount of a certain enzyme that you have, which is why some people can happily have coffee after dinner and sleep like a log, and other people have a cutoff point at sort of lunchtime, for example, or late afternoon. They realize they really can't have tea or coffee after that. Worth knowing that your ability to produce levels of that enzyme can change, particularly around menopause, because that's all about change. It's a big time of change. So don't assume that just because you could always do something, that actually you still can. Might be worth running a little audit on what you're having and change that. You may still find, I mean, there's lots of reasons to suppose that hot chocolate would be good, because warm milk, it's the warm milk, it's not the chocolate that sends you off to sleep, it's the warm milk. And that's why some of those other drinks, like sort of Horlicks and so on, which is a sort of malted drink, can be very effective compared to a sort of more chocolatey base. But again, it will depend on the individual and your sensitivity to caffeine.
Okay, so you've taken the cheesy puffs off me, and now it looks like my drinking chocolate, it needs to be curbed. What would be a suitable swap? You mentioned milk. Is that a good one to?
Well, the thing is that when it comes to foods, one of the foods that really supports our sleep is well, it's not a food, it's a nutrient. It's a compound, an amino acid called tryptophan. And tryptophan is used by the body, turns into serotonin, which in turn produces melatonin, which you probably heard of. That's the hormone that governs our sleep and wake cycles. And melatonin is designed to rise in the evening to get us all lovely and ready for sleep, and then fall in the morning so we spring out of bed. It works in direct opposition to cortisol, which is supposed to rise in the morning so we're all up and at 'em, and then fall in the evening. When we're too stressed, those two can swap over, and you can subvert that process so you're wide as awake right through to about 2 in the morning and before you're ready for bed, and that's not good news. So foods that are rich in tryptophan can help with that calming angle, and milk is one of the foods that's a good source of tryptophan. So are oats. So sometimes those sort of oat drinks, or warm milk with some oat biscuits or oat cakes, because of course that can also help to balance blood sugar before bed, particularly if you're someone who eats very early. It might be, if you eat early with the family, you might simply have just run out of anything to keep your blood sugar stable because you've eaten so early. So just sort of worth remembering that sometimes a snack before bed isn't a bad shout.
Okay, so that's one food. Any others that might be particularly high on the, you called it tryptophans?
Well, tryptophan, all amino acids are found in protein-rich foods. So protein's a really good shout, because protein also helps to balance blood sugar. So, you know, if you're really tired and you come home and you've only got time to knock out the pasta and the tomato sauce, as I mentioned earlier, that's not a good thing, because the pasta, unless it's wholemeal pasta, you'll burn through it really quickly. But you need that protein. The combination for blood sugar balance is protein and complex carbohydrate, because protein is hard to digest, so it slows down the release of the carbohydrate, keeps you going even longer. So really be thinking about, okay, if I'm just going to knock out a quick pasta dish, let's chuck some tuna in, let's chuck some prawns in, let's chuck some chickpeas or nuts and seeds in there if you're on a plant-based diet, so that actually you're balancing your blood sugar, because otherwise it's on a fast route to blood sugar spike. So at some point in the early night, you're going to be waking up again. And so that combination won't just balance your blood sugar, because tryptophan's an amino acid. Then thinking about the protein-rich foods is also going to be a really great shout.
Right, okay. So now is the point that I have to ask you the question about a glass of wine. I might actually mute you at this point, Jackie. You've already taken my cocoa away.
Look, the two great enemies of our sleep are caffeine and alcohol. They are both really, really powerful stimulants. Most people know that caffeine's an issue and have probably already started making adjustments. But if you haven't, just think on, and as I said, run that little caffeine audit, see where your latest cutoff point is. But alcohol's a double-edged sword, because you might think, you know, a little nightcap can help you relax, and so it can, and get you off to sleep. But it's also worth recognizing that alcohol's a sedative, so it won't be a natural sleep. And of course, the more alcohol you have, the more you will be disturbing the prolonging the REM phase of sleep, the rapid eye movement phase of sleep, which is when we dream. Our sleep cycles fall into 90 minutes, and there are different sections of different types of sleep within that, of which REM lasts about 20 minutes of that 90-minute cycle. If it's prolonged, that's the agitated sleep, when you might be murmuring in your sleep and dreaming. It's not the restful sleep. And if that's prolonged, even if you don't wake up, you're likely to have, you know, a poor sleep throughout the night and wake up feeling very unrefreshed. So it's really worth looking at alcohol, and also recognizing that it takes an hour for our body to process a unit of alcohol. And, you know, a single gin or vodka, if you're assuming you use the spirit measure and not the handy, you know, flexible wrist many of us have, it's not very much. And that way, at least you can keep on track of that. But wine is tricky, because it depends on the strength of the wine. And some of the New World wines can be sort of 15, 16%. So actually a glass of wine might contain anything between 3 to 5 units, depending on what you're having. And so again, you might sort of go off to sleep okay, but then as you metabolize that and then run out of it, halfway through the night, you're suddenly awake, because your body's thinking, well, we've got rid of the alcohol. What are you going to give me next? So I often recommend people to take 3 consecutive alcohol-free days each week as a minimum. And the consecutive bit's important, because it gives your liver time to do other jobs, really important jobs, like processing hormones, fat metabolism, producing energy, and so on. So it gives it time to get on with other jobs, and you'll find that you sleep much better in those days. So I'm not saying you can't ever have a glass of wine or a gin and tonic or whatever, but I am saying think about it in relation to your sleep, because if you struggle with sleep, it is very much going to be part of the picture.
Thank you very much, Jackie. So I know you're a very practical person, aren't you? You would never, thou shalt not. So think.
Try not to.
Well, you never do. And actually, I only have cheesy Wotsits for very, very exceptional times now, and it's a real treat. But, you know, the sort of the top tips then, you mentioned avoiding your blood sugar spike by having protein, eating at certain times of the day, because as you mentioned, some of us have earlier dinners with our family, and, you know, you wouldn't want to go to bed on an empty stomach, because that wakes you up.
Yes, absolutely. But equally, you know, too full a stomach can, particularly if you've got IBS or you're prone to bloating, you know, there's that horrible feeling if you've got very bloated, you sort of turn over in bed and then you sort of, your stomach comes a bit later and it's the most unpleasant feeling. So think about maybe having a peppermint tea to ease digestion after dinner, or you could go for sort of the full-on calming things like valerian tea or chamomile tea, lemon balm, all of which can really, really calm things down. So I'd certainly be looking at something like that. And a couple of other key areas to be thinking about. I talked about tryptophan as a sort of big thumbs up at amino acid. There's another amino acid called tyramine. And it's not bad for you as such, but the problem with tyramine is that it converts to noradrenaline. And that's the arousal neurotransmitter, the get up and go, the motivation, the excitement, the arousal, which isn't what you want when you're trying to get to sleep. And foods that are rich in tyramine would typically be things like processed meats, things like bacon, chorizo, salamis, and so on, and also aged cheeses. So, you know, if you struggle with sleep, it's probably not sensible to be having one of those sort of lovely cheese and cured meat platters with a glass of wine, because you may find that you have really disrupted sleep. And it's possible that the whole sort of wives' tale about sleep being cheese causing nightmares might come from the fact that, you know, aged cheese or mature cheese is higher in tyramine. And so something to keep an eye out for. And the other big one I'd really mention is magnesium. Yeah. Magnesium, for me, it's a game changer when it comes to sleep, particularly if you struggle to switch off and go to sleep. You know, once you're asleep, you're okay, but your mind won't go. Magnesium is nature's calmer. It really helps to regulate the nervous system, calm your stress response so that you're just feeling much more relaxed and able just to switch off and drop off. And you can also sort of cheat if you don't want to be eating lots of leafy green vegetables, which are the single best source of magnesium, everybody. You could have an Epsom salts bath, which is magnesium sulfate, and 2 or 3 handfuls in the bath, soak for about 20 minutes, or a foot bath's just as good if you're struggling with hot flushes. So consider that as well. And it's worth giving a shout out to calcium too. Most people are focusing hard on calcium at this stage because of bone strength. But also worth just knowing that calcium helps to regulate our sleep cycles. Those 90-minute cycles that I mentioned earlier, you need to complete them. If you wake up in the middle of a cycle, you won't go back to where you are in that cycle. When you go back to sleep, you start a new cycle. So if you don't complete a number of sleep cycles, you'll feel really rough in the morning. And that can sometimes explain why you might think you've had 8 hours sleep, but actually you've continually sort of broken a cycle, and so it's not terribly relaxing for you, whereas you might have only 5 hours sleep, but you completed every cycle, so you felt that actually you wake up feeling refreshed. And calcium and magnesium, I can see lots of things are flashing up in the chat before my eyes. I'm trying not to look at them, but I've seen lots and lots of comments about restless legs, aching muscles, and so on. Magnesium regulates muscle function. I'd really give it a big thumbs up for anyone struggling with that. B vitamins are a big factor in restless leg syndrome as well. And low calcium can also lead to muscle aches and cramps. So again, you know, dairy is a good source of calcium, but leafy green vegetables, twice as much calcium per 100 grams as milk, plus they've got all the magnesium. So my thought would be, you know, 2 or 3 handfuls of rocket, cabbage, kale, watercress, broccoli, all great sources of magnesium and calcium could really help.
And you did mention magnesium and calcium there, but and you can get those from foods, which is ideal. But if you can't get them through food, or if you think that, you know, I'm going to say when I'm out on the road and all over the place and things and grabbing something to eat, it's not always possible. Are there supplements that you can take?
Yes, of course. You can get magnesium in multiple forms. Epsom salts, the bath salts I've mentioned, is magnesium sulfate. Orally, that's not great because it's not terribly absorbable, nor is magnesium oxide. I would normally look for a magnesium citrate or a glycinate. Now, citrate's particularly good if you've got a bit of a sluggish bowel, because it can sort of galvanize what's going on with your stools and move things along a bit. If you're more prone to loose stools, you would be better off with magnesium glycinate, because that doesn't irritate or activate the gut. So that's what I'd be looking at.
And the same with calcium and the vitamin B that you mentioned.
I'd be looking at a B complex, because B vitamins are a family and they work together in synergy. Usually a deficiency in one would indicate a deficiency in another. Most good quality multivitamins and minerals have a good range of the Bs in, or if you don't want to do that, you can buy B complex. There's lots of good brands out there. I particularly like the BioCare B complex, but that's just my particular favorite. It's also got some magnesium in it, so I think it works very nicely, because you see magnesium supports the absorption of vitamin B6. So that's the thing about nutrients. They all work very closely together, which is why food is generally best, because Mother Nature has put them in the right synergy. So you don't have too much of one or too much of another. However, and that's why sort of high doses of individual concentrated nutrients in supplement form, you need to be careful. You need to make sure you're getting the support so you're not overdoing it. I see that something like a B complex has got a bit of everything in, and that magnesium just makes sure that you're getting really what you need from it. And yes, Cytoplan's a fabulous brand, by the way. I saw that.
Yes, and Vitibiotics is the one I tend to have for the calcium and the bone health and all of that. So that's a very good brand. But we don't advertise on here. But
no, sorry, I got a bit carried away with the chat.
Oh no. I think that was genuinely helpful. So, what would people look for when it comes to brand shopping? Recognised brands, certain codings on there, or?
Well, I think a couple of things. First of all, look for something that's got good quality absorbable. So absorbable forms of the nutrients are citrates, glycinates, and picolinates, for example. Sulfates, carbonates, and oxides. Calcium carbonate, for example, is basically chalk. They're cheap forms of the nutrients. If you've got a gut of iron, no problem, you can still absorb them. If you've got, not a great digestion, which is very common for women in midlife, even if you're paying less for them, you're not going to be getting your value for money. So you might as well pay a little bit more and go for a product that's got things like citrates in. And the thing I've noticed about these products is that they don't mix and match. What you'll generally find is that if it's a multivitamin that's got something citrate, like zinc citrate or calcium citrate, you don't need to look any further on the ingredients, because they tend to use all of expensive forms. If it's something you can see a sulfate in, then the same is true. They'll usually have the oxides and the carbonates. So you can work out what's right for you. As I said, if your gut's fine, then by all means go for the cheaper forms of the nutrients. It'll still be great, but they're not for everybody. So that's generally what I'd look out for. And just one other thing we didn't touch on is, if you are looking to supplement with calcium, really important to make sure your vitamin D isn't low. Most products now have a combination of calcium and vitamin D in any case, because you can't absorb calcium without vitamin D. So if you're stuffing yourself with calcium tablets and you're low in vitamin D, you will end up with calcium deposits in places you really don't want them, which can be painful and problematic. And one last shout out for vitamin D, some increasing research coming through to show that, if you're low in vitamin D, that could also be a cause of insomnia.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. You covered so much there, Jackie.
Sorry, I know, talking too fast again.
Not at all.
It was wonderful. I could see the chat going bonkers, and I'm going to have a little look there. And so welcome Sally Leach from Henpicked Menopause in the Workplace, who was looking through all of those questions and answering some, I could see. What were the general themes there, Sally?
Yeah, first of all, just want to say thank you everyone for joining in. People have been sharing their experiences, really empathizing with each other, sharing recommendations. So really appreciate that. It does make a big difference to these sessions. And just on the note of vitamin D that you mentioned there, a couple of people are talking about that feeling of, it's not being able to sleep, it's feeling like they're constantly exhausted and fatigued and that they want to sleep all the time. So any thoughts or tips around some things they might want to think about here?
Well, the first thing is you've got to go and see your doctor. You need to, because there are issues, if you're low in B12, you will feel absolutely on the floor. So if you're following a largely plant-based diet or a full-on vegan diet, that could be a factor, because it will catch up with you. The body can store B12 for a year or two or more, but it can run out. So it could be that that's a factor. And having B12 supplements, or if you're not able to absorb it, which is often an issue for some women, due to something called pernicious anemia, you might need B12 injections, for example. You might be low in vitamin D, so get that tested. It could be iron. If you're perimenopausal, you could be flooding and losing some of the iron that you would normally have built up. So get to your doctor first of all and look at that. Assuming everything's been ruled out and it's not your thyroid or any other medical condition that is affecting you and making you feel tired, I'd look at magnesium every time, because magnesium's our ignition key and it really kickstarts the entire energy production process. So when people are just feeling tired all the time and purely operating on sheer willpower, the chances are they're low in magnesium.
Fantastic, brilliant. We've got quite a few people saying that they're okay getting to sleep, but they're really struggling either waking that really alert and wake in the night, or waking really early in the morning and not being able to get back to sleep. I know you've covered that a little bit. Anything in particular around that issue that you can just highlight in terms of summary of what people might want to start thinking about?
Yeah, really go back to blood sugar. Start to examine, first of all, what you're having in the evening. What are you eating and drinking in the evening? Because that's a classic symptom, that waking up and feeling really alert, of your blood sugar dropping and your stress hormones triggering everything. So have you had a really good balanced evening meal? I would be looking at 25% of that meal should be protein. If you're having starchy carbs like rice or pasta, make sure they're whole grain and no more than 25% of the meal. Doesn't need to be half the plate. We don't need that much. And then the rest of it, vegetables, including some leafy greens, that'll get you the magnesium. That's the kind of balance that you would be looking at for a blood sugar. And then you need to think, but what other culprits are creeping in? Am I having, sneaky popcorn and chocolate and wine as I'm watching my Netflix? What am I doing after dinner? Because you might have this beautifully balanced meal and think, well, it's not that. And sort of forget the other little bits, the crisps and stuff that are creeping in. So think very hard. Are you setting yourself up to fail by what you're eating and drinking in the evening?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that links into the questions around how much we should be taking of some of these things. So in particular, so magnesium, I know we've seen some people saying it sometimes upsets their stomach, but we've said about the different types of magnesium. But if people are getting enough in their diet, or whether they should take supplements, and how do people know how much they should be taking of these things?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Most of us would benefit from a good multivitamin and mineral. It covers all the bases and it has a bit of everything in the safe way that I described. It sort of mimics the synergy of nature. Beyond that, if you've got a medical condition or are taking any medication, you should always check with your doctor, because nutrients are powerful things, particularly when they're in individual concentrated doses. Magnesium, by and large, is a pretty safe one, but you still need to be aware that because it's nature's karma, it brings your blood pressure down. So if you were on blood pressure medication and having a lot of magnesium supplements, then you might suddenly be prone to dizzy spells or falls or fainting, which we don't want. So be aware of that. Magnesium citrate is the one that can irritate your bowel. It can be great if you've got constipation, but if you've not, then that might be part of the irritation. So looking at a different form. The maximum recommended amount of dosage for magnesium is 400 milligrams. Without extra support from a health professional.
Yeah, fantastic. And just one final question around dark chocolate, because I know we said about not having it in the evening, and people saying that there are some benefits sometimes, or some potentially good things about eating dark chocolate, just maybe earlier in the day. Just wanted to get some reassurances around that.
Of course, yes, I'm not going to be totally mean. It's got some really interesting antioxidants in there, actually, and also compounds that can support libido. And let's be honest, you can have some dark chocolate in the evening. If you're sleeping fine, well, not a problem. But most of you you're here for a seminar on sleep, so I'm guessing that you probably aren't sleeping well, in which case either start by reducing it, sort of not the whole bar but one square, and see if you get away with that, because it's all going to be horses for courses and what's going on with the enzyme in your liver as to what it can cope with.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Jackie. And thank you, as I say, everyone, for joining in with some really fantastic questions and sharing. It's really appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. A little bit of a consultation there from you, Jackie, for us all. And I forgive you for taking away my drinking chocolate. I shall check in to see, is it actually affecting me? Is it better when I don't? Do I sleep better when I don't have it or when I do?
Yeah.
So maybe I'll do my own research on that one before I sort of can it all together. And thank you very much, Sally Leach, for looking after the questions, and so many today. And certainly we hope everybody follows these top tips, and we wish you a good night's sleep. So thank you very much, everyone. And
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.